Hello, I'd like to just make a little short video on social comparison theory. Um, there's a video below that will go more into detail, but let's just look at some good examples of this. Think about there's some companies like electric companies and have basically used some of the essence of social comparison theory uh, to get you to, in this case, use less electricity. We can see in this example, and they show you on their bill, they would show you how much you use, how much electricity you use. And then they say, well, let's look at your neighbors. And we can look at your neighbors who we think are efficient. Now, how they're defining efficiency, we don't really know. But they're at least providing a comparison. And then looking at all your neighbors. So in this case, we can see that you are doing better than your most efficient neighbors and much better than all your other neighbors. So think about this as an example of how we can use this social comparison theory. So think about the basic idea is for social comparison theory is that we often evaluate our own beliefs and stuff based upon how we compare to other people. Give you another example. I once had a student in a face-to-face class. When I handed back the test, he wanted to know what was the class average on the test. And I said, well, I don't know. I didn't compute it. And he's like, well, I need to know. And I said, well, what does it matter? I said, you know how you did based upon the standard of the grading scale. So you know how you did. He said, but I need to know how other people did. Because if everybody else did as terrible as I did, then I don't feel so bad. But if everybody else did pretty well and I did terrible, and then I really feel bad. I said, but you can't change how other people perform. And I try to get him to think about this. And this is actually one of the dangers of social comparison, is when you're comparing yourself to other people, you don't really know always who you're comparing yourself to. In other words, is it a fair comparison? Like, let's say you compare yourself to somebody who's highly intelligent and who doesn't have to study for the test because they really pick up things quickly. And let's say you're a student who you do pretty well, you're at least a solid C student, but you really put effort into the things you do and your grades reflect your effort. So it's not really fair to compare yourself to other people, especially if there's people you can't compete with. Because think about there's people at all different ability levels, and if you picked your own comparison group, you might feel really bad. To give you an actual real life example, when I was in graduate school, there was a woman who I knew that was getting ready to take her prelims. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the graduate process, when you're in graduate school, after you complete your master's and you're going to continue on and complete your PhD, there's a set of tests you take called prelims, and it's actually an abbreviation for preliminary examinations. And what prelims are is first you're given a written test. So for example, when I did my prelims, I had 2 days, 2 8-hour days of essay questions I could answer. And then if you pass those, and then you move on to an oral prelim where your PhD committee gets together and they ask you questions about the field and ask you to respond on the spot. And so the point of this is, because these prelims are supposed to gauge whether or not you have the potential to succeed in a PhD program, they ask you a lot of questions. So people typically prepare for these. You're usually given a reading list. Like I can't remember how many, I think I had a stack of articles like that thick and a few books to read. And so they give you some ideas of the topics they want you to cover, but not like a study guide like you get in high school. But basically, you'll spend 6 months studying for this exam, and I did. I spent 6 months or more studying, going through all this stuff, learning it, reading it, reviewing it. And this woman I was mentioning, when she took her prelim, she was a procrastinator, and she just kind of put it off and put it off. And so it wasn't until I think around 2 weeks before her prelims that she started studying. And then she was in a panic. She's like, oh, I might fail these prelims because I didn't prepare. And she said, well, it'd actually be a good thing for me because if I did, maybe it'd stop my procrastinating because maybe finally there'd be a serious consequence to my procrastinating. Now, fortunately or unfortunately for her, she passed her prelims. And so it did reinforce her procrastination. But my point of this example is, if you think about someone like her, if most people are studying 6 months or more in advance to take these tests, and she does it in 2 weeks and still passes, you don't want to compare yourself to her because you're always going to come up short. And that's one issue with social comparison. You really got to think about your comparison group. So this is one example of how you could use social comparison theory in the actual world to try to change people's behavior. People get these kind of utility bills, they might say, oh, I want to be better than my neighbors, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to reduce my usage. Another example is, here's one from a website. So think about how this is getting you to do comparison. You got things like sign up for your Pittsburgh Steelers newsletter, and they personalize it here. Now that isn't necessarily social comparison, but think about how this part over here is the social comparison. How many other people have read this article? How many people have commented? How many people like it? And then here, oh, a friend of yours on Facebook likes this post, and so forth. And so think about how maybe you might be more willing to want to read this article because you see, well, there's a lot of other people who read it, and I'm a fan, in this case, of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so I should read this article. And again, so sometimes companies use this, the theories we're learning about in class, as a way to influence behavior.